Hello, Professor Moreno. You will not be with us today, so I just want to explain to the audience that we went to your place. We are here to ask you a few questions. Professor Moreno is an expert of a lot of things. He's a scientist and he is an expert of complex systems, and therefore logically he's an expert of smart cities and of cities in general. And he is the author of challenging and interesting concept, which is the 15-minute city, and we went to ask him to explain a little bit of this to us. Professor, you digital, just, and green cities, Professor, digital, just, and green transitions are the EU pathway to resilience. As a pioneer in green and digital cities, do you think we can weather consecutive crises? Do you think cities have the right mechanisms to get over it?
Thank you for this kind invitation for discussing on my research and academic work, and of course several implementation of my thoughts or our thoughts with my team. Cities are today the places where the majority of the population lives. In Europe, we have 77% of the European populations in cities. We have, of course, the big metropolises, London, Paris, Madrid. Now we have the middle cities, we have the small cities, and in all cases, the common point is to share the same global threats. What is the most important global threat today? Climate change. This is a reality. I think that this is not more climate change, this is a real climate emergency. And for that, this is not more possible, this is no longer possible to continue to live with the same urban lifestyle. In my opinion, just after the COP21 in Paris 6 years ago, when the different parties have signed the Paris Agreement, I said that we need, in particular in cities, because cities are the most contributor for CO2 emissions, with transportation, with buildings, with the different technical networks, and it's not enough to decide the technical measures on captation or sequestration of CO2. We need in reality to change radically our urban lifestyle if we wanted to reach the carbon neutrality at the horizon 2050, because this is the common goal of of humanity today. And cities should today be the place for implementing concretely this new urban lifestyle. I proposed, in fact, to reduce radically our CO2 emissions with this concept, with the shorter distances urban life.
Yes, you're the author of this 15-minute city concept. What new things does it bring to the table? And especially, I'd like to know, is it really for big cities only? How can you sort of declinate adapt this concept to other sizes of city? Does it work for any city and any territory, rural areas, cross-border areas? Is this 30 minutes territories an alternative? How does it work?
Yes, my scientific contribution is based on to define a new model for cities, regardless of the size of cities, the density, the economic, and the social particularities, because we have considered that in all cities we have 6 crucial points for delivering a real quality of life. What are? The first one, to live in the good conditions, the social housing, the good conditions for materials and for having enough surface for inhabitants. The second point is to work with the radical reduction of long commute, with the decentralized work. The third one is to supply in shorter distances with the shorter circuits. The fourth, to take care of mental and physical health. The fifth, to access to education, culture. And the last but not least, to enjoy with biodiversity, with water and air, without pollution, with green areas resilient for climate change. We have proposed this model based on 6 essential functions for the compact zone, the 50-minute city, or for the middle and low densities, the 30-minute territory. The concept is the same concept with the different implementation. In the 50-minute city, we have the possibility to offer an access within a short perimeter on foot or by bike. In the 30-minute territory, we need, of course, to include other mobilities, in particular electric vehicles, on-demand transport, etc. With this vision, based on this model, we have the possibility to implement this way for the shorter distances, 50-minute city, 30-minute territory, in different sizes of density of territories. This is the concrete case today in Europe, because we have the possibility to implement in a city as Paris, Rome, Milan, and at the same time, in the very, very small cities, even ruralities. We needed to develop a new paradigm, a new methodological guidelines for fighting against climate change, and at the same time to develop local economies, local jobs, to create added value, and to develop a more inclusive city for develop a strong social link and to fight against racism, poverty, and social exclusion.
Yes, I understand, of course, that the 15-minute city concept is not a magic wand. However, I still would like to understand a little bit better how you can make it work under a critical mass, how you can make it work in low-income neighborhoods. I cannot, we are in a place where we're talking about cohesion and spatial justice. So I would like to understand how you're going to propose that people who commute to get better jobs, people who, shops that don't want to come in areas that are not reputable, how can this work with your concept?
Yes, indeed, the 50-minute city, on the one hand, is not a magic wand for transforming 70 decades of the traditional urbanism based on a segmented city, fractured city, specialized city. We have today a lot of cities in Europe just for living in the conditions where it's natural to commute every day for 2 hours even 3 hours for a round trip, just for joining my office from my office from my home. This is unsustainable. In fact, we wanted to transform this ancient model for developing more mixity. Mixity for developing a new economic model for localizing economy, for localizing local jobs, for developing more local commerce, for developing more sociability. And of course, we don't have the possibility for changing the global economic model of the European system. But our contribution is a contribution for concretely transforming with the concrete new urban policy, with the new measures and the new administrative tools, a new urban management in order to rebalance the conditions for living, working, and to access to essential services in cities. After the COVID-19, in reality, we have been observing the spread of this concept, not only in Europe. Why? The first one, when I proposed this concept, was during the COP21, 6 years ago. Several people said to me at this moment, this is a very nice concept, but this is just a nice utopia, because it wasn't possible to work close to home. And okay, this is the academic research. See you for the next idea. 6 years after, when the COVID-19 is a drama, with at the same time, in a few weeks, the spark for transforming radically our work style, this concept in reality is embraced by the essential of local mayors, of international organization of mayors. Why? Because we have this possibility for offer not solutions, but a new framework, a methodological guideline to transform the traditional urbanism based on centralized decisions, vertical activities, isolated urban lifestyles, the historical center, administrative center, corporate district, middle areas for people, poor or worker class districts. We have the possibility for giving a new trajectory for developing more and more intersections, for mutualizing, for developing a critical mass, for having more and more public services, for offering a new approach for optimizing our investments.
Okay, let's talk about the impacts of COVID, and let's talk about people. In your last book, Urban Life and Proximity in Times of COVID, you argue for a more human approach in cities. How do you see the role of stakeholders in cities? How do you anticipate that you won't have always the same usual suspects meddling?
The COVID-19, in reality, on the one hand, it is still now, a real drama, because for the first time in the modern era, we have this planetary pandemic with the tragic consequences. On the other hand, I consider that the COVID-19 pandemic, it is still now, a great opportunity for changing our urban and territorial lifestyle. The first point, with the COVID-19, in just a few days, a few weeks, we needed to change radically our daily commute for embracing new technologies, for learning to have an access with the remote jobs, but not only. I think that the most relevant point was our new perception of the useful time, because during the COVID-19, this is a compulsory to live in the lockdown, to live in proximity, to explore our public space in proximity, green areas, to find local shops in our neighborhoods, and we have this possibility to take back again control of our useful time. For the 50-minute city, for the 30-minute territory, it was a totally new way for developing worldwide this concept. The mayors, the local governors, the International Association of Mayors, for example, the C40 cities, a very important global network of mayors fighting against climate change. And the private stakeholders were totally involved for embracing this concept and to propose the new ambitious roadmap for imagining to live differently during the COVID-19, and the most important, for continuing to develop this new trajectory after COVID-19. I think that 2 years after the beginning of the COVID-19, in reality, we have today a radical change in the mindset of several mayors around the world for proposing a new ways for taking proximity as the core of the new urban policy and the new territorial policy. And the private sector today is a great partner. For example, the real estate sector for developing more building, for reusing, for hosting several different activities in the same place, for developing not the big shop centers, the big malls and the outskirts, but to introduce the local shops in cities, for working for developing more green areas in public spaces, for reducing the places of cars, for opening more and more public services in the neighborhood, for developing more health services, because the COVID-19 is the first global pandemic and certainly is not the last, unfortunately. But this is today a new situation for anticipating the new pandemics, maybe.
In a recent ESPON study on the territorial impacts of COVID, we observed that the pandemic contamination, the main culprit was interactions between people. How can we imagine to reconcile health rules observance and a minimum of social cohesion.
Today, with the new situations with the COVID-19, I think that proximities is one of the ways for reconciling the local economic development and to with the involvement of citizens for having more and more social activities for developing strong social links. One example, with the new technologies, several new corporates wanted to deploy this concept of dark store. The dark store, this is this idea for shopping only by internet and to have in less than 15 minutes my things. Today, several mayors consider that this way it is not viable for developing a human scale in cities. And in Europe, in France, for example, the dark stores aren't authorized for opening. We need to preserve this convergence between economy with the social impact, with the real creation of employment, and to develop more and more vitality, in fact. Jane Jacobs, the North American activist, when she proposed in the 70s the concept of living city, she said, a livable city is a city when we could have anytime, anywhere, multiple choices. For the 50-minute city, for the 30-minute territory, this is the golden rule. And for the economic activities, for the social activities, this is at the center of this new paradigm. To have, in all circumstances, in all moments, multiple choices. Multiple choices for working, for supplying, for having medical services, for using public spaces in the intergenerational ages, for taking care with gender equity, for children, etc. I think that we have a powerful proposal in order to satisfy the economical needs for developing a more resilient economy, and at the same time for developing more sociability, because we need absolutely sociability in cities, because in other case we will have maybe a very interesting economy without people that take a real social benefit. And this is today our challenge. We don't have an only ecological challenge. We have a social, economical, and ecological challenge for having cities viable, livable, and equitable. And this is the motto of the 50-minute city, of the 30-minute territory, of the city of proximity, based on urban and territorial policy, based with the common good. The common good, this is vital for protecting people against the gentrifications, for having a polycentric city, for having polycentric territory, for having a city or a territory with the multiple opportunities for all. We need to fight against gentrification because the gentrification is our common enemy in all cities, regardless of the size of city.
The war has had an enormous impact on, an enormous additional impact on our economies, on our European economies, especially with respect to energy and refugee, but not only. They have impacted cities and places. In this light, our policymakers are making proposals to respond as best as they can in the short term. What do you think they are likely to overlook in this urgency management that is important and that you would recommend they take into account a bit more so that it doesn't cost more afterwards?
I worried to say that, but this catastrophic situation in Europe, this war, now in 2022, in reality, we could resume by the urgence for deploying more localism, for having more autonomy, for having less dependency, for having more flexibility, more adaptivity, for using local resources. One of the problems of this war, of course, is the energy dependency. But this is not the only. We have at the same time a very strong food crisis. We have this totally amazing increase of the basic materials, copper, steel, etc. And the human drama with the refugees, more than 5 million Ukrainian refugees in the border of Poland, Hungary, etc. I said that we needed to learn about this drama, and in my opinion, I am very comfortable with the 30-minute concept, 30-minute territory, with the shorter distances, with the polycentric urban and territorial life, because this is a way for cutting this dependency, for developing more local resources, more local activities, for developing more and more stronger social links, for having more social intensity, more sociability, for fighting against hate attitudes, for having otherness, because we need today to develop otherness for hosting people. We have this dramatic Russian war, but we need to do the difference between the Russian politicians, Putin military, with the Russian people. We need to continue to host Russian intellectuals, poets, musicians, which don't have a link with the military policy or Putin policy. We need to develop this idea of more and more otherness, and today we need to be aware that this situation is a situation in Europe, a new crisis for, I think, a long time. And we need to take these situations as a new input for fostering our will for transforming and more localism and more intensive activities in lot of proximities. Proximity is not only the proximity of distances. Proximity is as well by new technologies, by cultural links, by social links, by different immaterials ways. We need to be more and more involved for developing lot of proximity, because Edgar Morin, the French philosopher, said complexity is before all to say hello to all people, even and more unknown people. And we need today to say hello to different people, not only by internet, by to physical host. And in the next times, I think that proximity is the key. Proximities, in the plural, is the key for developing more and more inclusions and to avoid to have new walls in Europe.
I'm not surprised that you quote Edgar Morin, a famous sociologist of the pensée complexe, the
Yes.
complex thinking, with your taste for complex systems. To end this, and playing the devil's advocate, with all these policies that we have to change every other day, measures we have to take that are constantly changing, do you think we can afford the luxury of having visions in times of crisis?
No, this is a good question, and this is totally welcome to be a devil attitude. What is our role? I'm not a politician. I'm not a candidate for nothing. I am a thinker. And our role is to develop more analysis for anticipating the evolutions for the future. And our social role is to develop new proposals, new ideas for moving towards a new urban and territorial lifestyle. In reality, we don't have more choice. Carbon neutrality at the horizon 2050 is not an option, it's compulsory. And today, in May 2022, climate change, the climate emergency is a reality. We have 1.3 million people in Asia, in India, under a catastrophic heat wave, with the extreme limits of the acceptability for humans. What is the situation today in Europe? In the spring, for the first time, we have a new heat wave. Today in Paris, we have reaching 37 degrees in just at the beginning of the spring. This is the concrete reality. This is not luxury to propose a new way for transforming, because I am not a prospectivist. I am a thinker for proposing the concrete actions here and now for changing. Of course, I'm not this capability for transforming. I need the acceptability of our ideas for the local governance, for mayors, or president of metropolises, or more. And our role is to discuss, to exchange, to spread this idea. And when we have the possibility, this is my case, to have the acceptation, for example, by the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, for transforming, when we have the possibility for be listened by the C40 cities, by the United Local Governance associations. This is a new windows for developing several transformations. And I said, if our thought can to be implemented just in 1%, 2%, in reality, I am very, very happy, because just 1% or 2% of our ideas maybe going to transform the life of several millions of people anywhere.
Make a difference.
Yeah.
A little drop of water, you will contribute. Thank you very much, Professor,
Thank
for
you
your
for
time.
your invitation.
And now we will go back to the panel.